Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Adelina and I make videos about living in this tiny house on wheels and living a more intentional life. I'm sorry that I'm talking fast, but my neighbor way over there is has his chainsaw out, and he's obviously doing some, I don't know, wood cutting or something like that. So if you hear the buzz in the background, I'm sorry. But today I wanted to talk about this tiny house parking pad. And basically what you need in a parking pad for your tiny house. Well, it looks like my microphone does not want to work in the cold, and it is cold out here. Anyways, so I'll talk really loud and I'll try and make sure this is loud enough for you guys to hear. Again, I apologize for the chainsaw in the distance. The number one topic I get asked about on my channel is parking. How to find parking. Where can you park legally? How did I find my parking spot? What does it cost to park a tiny house? What do you need for a spot? What does a spot need to be like, look like in order to park a tiny house? All excellent questions that I've talked about in other videos. Today's video is just on what do you need for a tiny house parking spot in order to park your tiny house so that it is safe and doesn't give you any problems down the road. So we're going to talk about that. When I found this parking spot, it was basically jungle. There was trees. It looked just like back there. There was trees. Well, maybe not quite like back there. There was trees, bushes. It wasn't level at all. There was all these humps and dips. And so I was a little bit apprehensive about how the landlord was going to make it ready for a tiny house. But the good thing was he really asked for my feedback. He asked me exactly what did I need for my tiny house in order to park it here, because he wanted to make sure to build a spot that would attract a good renter, keep a good tenant. You'll see from the footage that I'm going to insert here that this spot looked very different 6 months ago. So here's how it is. That's my gate. I would come in, and that section is what's getting cleared, and that's where the tiny house will be. And with a bunch of these trees gone, it'll be a lot sunnier, and I think it'll be awesome. Yeah. So a good tiny house parking spot needs several things. You need access to the spot because you're going to have to pull your tiny house in. You need a level spot because your house has to sit level. You need solid foundation because you don't want your house settling. And you need the ability to get the utilities that you need. So the starting point is going to be your access. Now, if you have watched my move videos, especially day number 2, you know that we had issues with this access. Now, the spot is, the driveway is wide enough. It's wider than when I saw it because I asked for them to widen this access road in because I knew that getting the tiny house in here was going to be, he was going to need some width because the house is 9.5 feet wide. But I didn't anticipate the angle that he would have to back in here because there is a fence right here for my neighbors. And so he couldn't just drive straight out and then back straight in. He had to come in at an angle. He came this way and then backed in this way. So this angle here was not quite right. And we ended up, as you saw in that video, having to fill that in temporarily with planks, with rocks, with stumps, in order for him to make that angle to back the tiny house into the property. So the number one thing you need to ensure is that your parking spot has a wide enough driveway, but also has a good enough angle for your mover, or you, if you're moving your own tiny house, to back your house into your spot. That's going to be really important for obvious reasons. Trust me, watch my video. Number 2, you want to make sure that this grade up into your spot is not too steep, because if it is, you will bottom out your tiny house. And that happened, but just a little bit, because the truck went over, but the house is behind the truck, of course, and it's still a little bit lower until it gets up over that lump. We ended up putting some planks down to lift it up just a little bit and get it over. So it wasn't a huge deal, but if it had been any steeper than this, it would have been a big deal. So make sure that the driveway up to where your house is going to be parked isn't too steep. If it's steep, but it's a long, gradual driveway, not a problem. But there is, not that much of a distance here. And so that was a problem. Number 3, make sure that the spot that you're parking your tiny house on is big enough so that you can block it up and all of the blocks can be fairly the same height. You don't want to have the front blocks being really high and a little bit unstable compared to the blocks at the middle and the back of your tiny house. You want to be able to block it up so the pad that the house is actually going to sit on needs to be level as can be. You're obviously going to be blocking it up and you're going to be leveling it out to make sure it's level once it's set. But the pad should be as level as they can get it before your house gets there. Ooh, it's chilly out here. Now you saw from the video that this was dirt and vegetation before. So when the excavator came, and he did hire a professional, which I would recommend you do, when the excavator came, he not only cleared all that vegetation, trees came down, vegetation got cleared, but he also leveled the ground, and then he started to compact it and build up layers. And this is going to be important, particularly if you are in a humid climate, a climate where there is a rainy season. And even in drier climates, the weather is changing, and which means that in an area that gets very little rainfall now, 10, 20 years from now, could be very different. So what he did was, on top of the earth that he had leveled out and packed down, he then laid fine gravel, packed that down, and then laid this heavier gravel, this thicker gravel, this size gravel. Now this is the top layer of it, but there are multiple layers of pad buildup here. And because he was a professional who had built pads for tiny houses before, he knew exactly what he needed. Because I had been very, very clear with my landlord about how the pad needed to be well drained and very solidly packed. So we have had a couple of storms that have lasted multiple days where it has rained and rained and rained, and this pad drains super well. Now I am up a bit, so it should, but if this wasn't well graveled, I would end up with mud, soupiness, puddles, standing water, and I don't have any of that. I have no concerns at all. It has been fantastic. Also, because the house is fairly heavy, she's 9.5, well, not fairly heavy. We know how heavy she is based on, if you've watched my move videos, you know how heavy she is. She's heavy, which means that even blocked up, she needs to be on a surface that's really solid, because I can't have the house coming unlevel. It would be such a hassle to take the skirting off and have to put the jacks down and re-level the house because it started to shift, after a year or two, or, God forbid, every year that you'd have to do that. Which is why you want to build the foundation. The money needs to be spent here if you're doing it yourself. And for any of you that are out there and thinking about putting a tiny house parking pad on your property to rent out, that's where you want to spend your money. Because once you have this, then the work is done. The money is done. And you will attract a much better renter. And as a renter, you're going to want to look for that. So don't park your tiny house on sand. Even if you put cement blocks down and then block up on that, things will shift, especially if it gets wet. So multiple layers of gravel on hard packed earth is the way you want to go, because you really want it well drained. And finally, if it is a priority for you to be on grid, even to some degree, make sure that your parking pad is close to utilities. The reason that the electrical panel is here is because it's close to the road where the main power pole for BC Hydro is. So when the landlord had the electricity put in, it didn't cost a fortune. If I had insisted on having the pole at the back of the lot, it would have cost a lot more money to bring the electricity into the spot. For me, it didn't matter. I knew I could make it work. But you just want to be thinking about that when you are setting up a parking pad or when you are looking at one. Where is the electrical? Is there electrical? How expensive will it be to bring it in? Electrical was a priority for me because I work from home and I needed 50 amp service. That was a non-negotiable. Now keep in mind, I'll be here for a few years, who knows? But because my landlord has invested in the infrastructure of building this pad so well, of having the electrical brought in, of having water hard piped in from the well on his property through the forest over to my property. He now has a spot that he will always be able to rent out to a tiny house dweller and always get a decent rent for. In my mind, this spot is worth every cent that I pay. I pay $800 a month for rent, Canadian, and on Vancouver Island, that is a really good price for a spot that is in such a beautiful location, so close to amenities, and has electrical and water. And I have that French drain for my gray water. So I wanted to share my learnings and my experience with this parking pad in particular, because like you saw, there was nothing here when I started. I was really hoping he would be done with that chainsaw by now. So I hope that was useful. I hope it gave you some hints, some tips for when you are doing your tiny house search, because making sure that your pad is built properly, is stable, is solid, and is well drained and you have proper access is key in order for you to get just your long time perfect spot. If you're building it yourself, those are the things to focus on. I think that those are the areas to spend the money on to make sure that you have it built properly. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're staying warm because, oh my gosh, it's cold out here. I'm going to go inside and snuggle with Sophie. Anyways, I love you guys. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. I'll see you next Sunday. Just wanted to jump in and say, now that I'm warm, if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. I noticed that only 50% of my viewers are subscribers, and we don't know why, because it is a great family here of awesome people. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. It really helps the channel grow. And for my Patreons, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you next time.